Before Prometheus became a symbol, before he became a punishment, before he became a warning or a promise, he existed in a world where gods were still sorting out what it meant to rule. To understand Prometheus, we have to step backward into the unsettled early mythology of Greece, when order was not yet stable and power was not yet secure. Prometheus is not an Olympian god. That matters. He belongs to the older generation, the Titans, descendants of primordial forces rather than polished rulers of civilization. His father, Iapetus, represents mortality and limitation. His brothers embody traits that would later haunt humanity. Atlas with endurance and burden, Epimetheus with foolish hindsight, Menoetius with reckless violence. Prometheus alone stands apart, defined not by strength or obedience, but by foresight. His very name means forethought. From the beginning, Prometheus is a liminal figure, neither fully aligned with the old cosmic chaos nor fully obedient to the new Olympian order under Zeus. This in-between status is crucial. Prometheus is not rebelling from below like a monster, nor ruling from above like a god-king. He is close to humanity, close enough to see them clearly, yet powerful enough to intervene. In early myth, humanity is not noble, clever, or destined for greatness. Humans are fragile, short-lived, and easily erased. Some traditions suggest Zeus considered wiping them out entirely, seeing them as noisy, inefficient, and ungrateful. Prometheus, by contrast, sees potential. Not greatness, at least not yet, but possibility. This alone places him in quiet opposition to divine authority. The first great conflict does not involve fire at all. It begins with food. At Mycone, Prometheus arranges a sacrifice meant to establish the relationship between gods and humans. He divides an ox into two portions, one pile of rich meat hidden inside an unappealing stomach, and another pile of gleaming bones wrapped in white fat. Zeus, asked to choose, selects the visually appealing offering, the bones, thereby condemning the gods to receive symbolic sacrifices while humans keep the nourishing flesh. This moment, recorded most clearly in Works and Days, is often read as a clever trick. But historically, it functions as something much larger, a mythic explanation for why humans eat meat and gods receive smoke and ritual. Prometheus is not just mocking Zeus, he is defining civilization itself, embedding deception, symbolism, and negotiation into the human-divine relationship. Zeus is not fooled in the naive sense. He allows the trick to stand and then responds. His retaliation is subtle at first. He withholds fire from humanity. Fire in this context is not merely warmth or cooking. Fire represents technology, transformation, and control over nature. Without it, humans remain close to animals, cold, vulnerable, dependent. By removing fire, Zeus reasserts divine dominance. Humanity is reminded of its place. This is where Prometheus crosses the line from clever mediator to active transgressor. By stealing fire and giving it back to humans, Prometheus does not simply restore comfort, he restores momentum. He makes progress irreversible. Tools can now be forged. Food can be preserved. Communities can gather at night. Knowledge can compound. Once fire exists in human hands, there is no returning to divine containment. From a historical perspective, this act mirrors humanity's earliest technological leaps: stone tools, controlled flame, metallurgy. The myth encodes a deep cultural memory, the moment humans stopped merely surviving and began shaping their environment. Prometheus becomes the mythic personification of that turning point. Yet even here, contradictions emerge. Prometheus acts for humanity, but he never asks their permission. He decides on their behalf. He assumes suffering is worth progress. Zeus punishes Prometheus eternally, but humans suffer consequences as well, most notably through the creation of Pandora, whose curiosity releases pain, disease, and toil into the world. This duality is essential. Prometheus is not a simple hero. He is not gentle. His gift brings both empowerment and endless labor. From a historical lens, this reflects an ancient ambivalence toward civilization itself. Technology improves life, but it also multiplies responsibility, hierarchy, and suffering. Already, in the earliest layer of the myth, Prometheus embodies a question that will echo for millennia. Is knowledge a gift or a burden forced upon us? This question does not belong only to myth. It belongs to every society standing on the edge of a new tool, a new energy source, or a new way of understanding the world. In Prometheus, the ancient Greeks gave that tension a face. One bound in chains, caught between gods and mortals, punished not for cruelty, but for choosing progress over obedience. In the next segment, we will descend into Prometheus's punishment itself, not just as a story of divine cruelty, but as a symbolic framework for how cultures understand rebellion, suffering, and the cost of defying absolute power. When a fire is stolen and humanity steps irreversibly into the realm of technology, Zeus does not respond with chaos or rage. He responds with structure. Punishment in Greek myth is rarely impulsive. It is theatrical, symbolic, and meant to be remembered. What happens to Prometheus is not merely revenge. It is a lesson stage for gods and mortals alike. Prometheus is bound to a remote mountainside. Most traditions place this in the Caucasus Mountains, a geographical edge of the known world. This location matters. Civilization, for the Greeks, radiated outward from the polis. To be chained at the edge of the world was to be removed from order, from community, from dialogue. Prometheus is not imprisoned in a dungeon. He is displayed. Each day an eagle, an animal sacred to Zeus, descends and devours Prometheus's liver. Each night it regenerates. The cycle repeats endlessly. To a modern audience, this can feel grotesque or excessive. But historically, the liver was not chosen at random. In ancient Greek thought, the liver was associated with emotion, vitality, and foresight. It was believed to be the seat of prophecy and inner life. By destroying and restoring it daily, Zeus is not simply inflicting pain, he is attacking Prometheus's defining trait, his foresight. This is punishment tailored to identity. Unlike other mythic punishments, Sisyphus rolling his stone, Tantalus reaching for unreachable water, Prometheus remains mentally lucid. He does not forget why he suffers. He does not lose memory, speech, or defiance. In some versions, he continues to mock Zeus, predicting the god's eventual downfall through a secret prophecy Prometheus refuses to reveal. Here the myth introduces a deep contradiction. Prometheus is physically powerless, yet intellectually superior. Zeus has total authority, yet lacks complete knowledge. The Titan's chains restrain his body, but not his insight. From a historical point of view, this reflects a recurring anxiety in hierarchical societies. Power can dominate action, but not necessarily truth. This tension is explored most fully in Prometheus Bound, where Prometheus is portrayed not as a trickster, but as a tragic figure, enduring suffering with dignity, convinced that Zeus's reign is temporary. The play transforms the myth from a cautionary tale into something closer to political philosophy. Was Prometheus wrong? The text refuses to give a simple answer. Zeus is cruel, but also lawful. Prometheus is compassionate, but also arrogant. He never apologizes. He never claims regret. His suffering does not purify him, it clarifies him. From a cultural perspective, this reflects the Greek discomfort with absolute moral clarity. Their myths rarely offer clean heroes or villains. Instead, they stage conflicts between competing values: obedience versus innovation, authority versus foresight, stability versus progress. Prometheus's eternal punishment serves another purpose as well. It normalizes suffering as the price of advancement. Humanity keeps fire, tools, and knowledge, but the one who enabled this progress pays endlessly. This mirrors a pattern seen throughout history, where innovators are often punished, exiled, or destroyed, while their ideas survive and spread. Importantly, Prometheus does not suffer instead of humanity. Humans suffer because of the gift. Pandora's jar releases toil, illness, and sorrow into the world. Fire brings warmth and metallurgy, but also war, deforestation, and domination. The myth subtly argues that suffering is not a glitch in civilization, it is woven into its foundation. In this way, Prometheus's chains become symbolic. They represent the binding cost of knowledge. Once a society embraces progress, it cannot escape its consequences. Someone, often unseen, often forgotten, absorbs the pain that allows others to advance. Prometheus knows this. He accepts it without repentance. And that is what makes his punishment unsettling. Not the gore, not the eternity, but the fact that Zeus cannot break Prometheus's conviction. In the next segment, we will examine how Prometheus's story shifts across sources and centuries, how poets, playwrights, and philosophers reshape him to reflect changing ideas about authority, justice, and rebellion. Prometheus does not exist as a single, fixed figure. He shifts depending on who is telling the story and when they are telling it. This is one of the clearest signs that the myth is doing cultural work rather than preserving simple folklore. As Greek society changes, Prometheus changes with it. The earliest surviving accounts come from Hesiod, writing during a time when order, hierarchy, and obedience were deeply valued. In Hesiod's worldview, the universe is fragile. Justice is enforced from above. Human suffering is the natural result of defying divine limits. In Theogony and Works and Days, Prometheus is not heroic. He is clever, yes, but his cleverness is disruptive. His deception at Mycone angers Zeus. His theft of fire provokes punishment. Humanity's hardships, labor, illness, mortality, are framed as downstream consequences of Prometheus's interference. Here, Prometheus is a cautionary figure. He embodies the danger of overreaching intelligence. Knowledge does not elevate humanity in Hesiod's telling. It destabilizes the cosmic order. The moral gravity tilts clearly toward Zeus, whose authority, however harsh, is presented as necessary. But several centuries later, the tone shifts dramatically. In Prometheus Bound, the Titan becomes something closer to a moral dissident. The audience no longer sees a reckless trickster, but a suffering benefactor of humankind. Zeus, newly crowned and insecure in his power, appears tyrannical. His rule is enforced through fear rather than justice. This version of Prometheus speaks at length about what he has given humanity. Not just fire, but memory, mathematics, writing, agriculture, medicine, architecture, and prophecy. Civilization itself is laid at his feet. Humans, he says, once lived like dreamers, seeing without understanding, acting without foresight. Prometheus awakens them. This is not a minor reinterpretation. It reflects a society increasingly interested in law, debate, and the limits of authority. Athens, where Aeschylus wrote, was experimenting with democracy, civic responsibility, and public dissent. In this cultural moment, Prometheus becomes legible as a principled rebel rather than a cosmic nuisance. Yet even Aeschylus refuses to simplify him. Prometheus is proud. He is stubborn. He openly admits that he acted knowingly and would do so again. He does not deny that Zeus has power, only that Zeus deserves unquestioned obedience. This tension mirrors the political questions of time. When does authority become tyranny, and when does resistance become moral? Later thinkers push the myth further inward. By the time of Plato, Prometheus becomes less a character and more a metaphor. In dialogues like Protagoras, the story is reframed to explain the origin of human political order. Fire and technical skill are not enough. Humans also need justice, shame, and law to survive together. Prometheus gives tools, but Zeus must later give moral restraint. Here, the myth is no longer about defiance, but balance. Technology without ethics leads to chaos. Intelligence without social cohesion leads to collapse. Prometheus is necessary, but insufficient. What we see historically is a gradual internalization of the myth. Early versions externalize blame. Suffering comes from angering the gods. Later versions turn inward. suffering comes from misusing knowledge or failing to govern ourselves. This evolution is crucial. Prometheus survives because he is adaptable. He can be a villain, a martyr, a benefactor, or a warning depending on the needs of the culture telling his story. The core act, stealing fire, remains the same, but its meaning is endlessly renegotiated. That flexibility explains why Prometheus never disappears. He is not tied to one moral lesson. He is a framework for thinking about progress itself, its risks, its costs, and its inevitability. In the next segment, we will step outside myth and into anthropology, exploring how Prometheus encodes humanity's earliest memories of fire, technology, and the moment we truly separated ourselves from the natural world. Long before Prometheus was chained to a mountainside, fire itself was already ancient. From a historical and anthropological perspective, the Prometheus myth does not invent fire, it remembers it. It compresses tens of thousands of years of human struggle into a single, symbolic act, the moment when flame passed decisively into human hands. Archaeological evidence shows controlled fire use stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. Fire altered diet, social structure, and cognition. Cooked food increased caloric intake, reshaping jaws, teeth, and even brain development. Nighttime fires created shared spaces for storytelling, teaching, and ritual. In this sense, fire was not just a tool, it was the first technology that reorganized what it meant to be human. Prometheus embodies this transition. As a mythic figure, Prometheus stands in for the unknown innovators of deep prehistory, the ones who learned not just to fear fire, but to keep it alive, transport it, and reproduce it. These early humans were not stealing fire from gods, but from nature itself. The myth reframes this dangerous mastery as transgression because culturally, it felt like one. Fire blurs a boundary that ancient societies were deeply concerned with, the boundary between the human and the divine. Lightning, volcanic flame, and the sun were all seen as heavenly or chthonic forces. To hold fire was to hold a fragment of cosmic power. Prometheus's theft expresses a primal anxiety. What happens when mortals acquire abilities once reserved for the gods? This is why Zeus's reaction is so severe. From a symbolic standpoint, Zeus is not merely angry about disobedience, he is defending a cosmic hierarchy. Fire collapses distance. It allows humans to reshape their environment rather than submit to it. Historically, this mirrors the moment when humans ceased being purely ecological participants and became ecological disruptors. The myth also preserves an older tension between innovation and tradition. In early societies, technological change was dangerous. A new tool could upset food distribution, social roles, or power structures. Those who introduced change often faced suspicion or punishment. Prometheus's suffering encodes this reality. The bringer of new knowledge becomes the bearer of blame. There is another, subtler layer at work. Fire requires maintenance. It must be fed, protected, and controlled. Once humans possess it, they become responsible for it. Prometheus gives fire freely, but humanity inherits its obligations. This echoes a recurring pattern in human history. Every technological leap introduces new dependencies. Mastery always carries cost. In this sense, Zeus's punishment of Prometheus parallels a deeper truth. Nature does not punish humanity directly for innovation, but consequences accumulate relentlessly. Fire enables metallurgy, metallurgy enables weapons, weapons enable war. The myth externalizes these consequences as divine retribution, but the underlying logic is ecological and social rather than supernatural. Prometheus also introduces foresight into the human story. His defining trait is not strength, but anticipation, seeing outcomes before they occur. This reflects a uniquely human adaptation, planning across generations. Fire allows for storage, settlement, and projection into the future. Prometheus is less about flame than about time. From this angle, Prometheus becomes a mythic fossil, a cultural artifact preserving humanity's dawning awareness of its own power. He is not simply a god who gives fire. He is the story humans tell themselves about becoming dangerous. And yet, the myth remains conflicted. Fire saves lives, but it also destroys landscapes. It gathers communities, but it sharpens inequality. Prometheus's gift is irreversible, just as humanity's technological trajectory cannot be undone. The chains on the mountain are not there to stop progress. They are there to remind us that progress extracts payment. In the next segment, we will examine how this ancient tension migrates into later eras, how Prometheus is reinterpreted through Roman thought, early Christianity, and the emerging moral frameworks of the Western world. As Greek culture spread across the Mediterranean, its myths did not remain intact. They were translated, repurposed, and absorbed into new moral frameworks. Prometheus survived this transition, but not unchanged. In Roman and early Christian contexts, his story becomes quieter, more restrained, and more morally ambiguous. The Romans inherited Greek mythology at a time when they valued order, law, and empire over philosophical rebellion. As a result, Prometheus loses some of his subversive edge. Roman writers were less interested in cosmic defiance and more concerned with duty, discipline, and hierarchy. Innovation was useful, but only when it served the state. In Roman retellings, Prometheus is often remembered not for stealing fire, but for shaping humanity itself, sometimes literally forming humans from clay. This shift is subtle but important. Fire represents disruption. Creation represents craftsmanship. Prometheus becomes an artisan rather than a rebel, a civilizing force rather than a challenger of authority. This reframing reflects Roman priorities. The empire admired builders, engineers, and lawgivers. The dangerous aspect of Prometheus, the willingness to defy supreme authority, was softened. His punishment remains, but its moral weight changes. Suffering becomes the price of ambition, not the consequence of injustice. Yet even as Prometheus is domesticated, his story does not disappear. Instead, it begins to echo in unexpected places, particularly in early Christian thought. While Christianity does not adopt Prometheus directly, it inherits many of the same questions: the origin of suffering, the danger of forbidden knowledge, and the consequences of overreaching. The parallel is impossible to miss. A figure intervenes on behalf of humanity. A boundary set by divine authority is crossed. Knowledge is gained. Suffering follows. In the Christian narrative, the focus shifts from fire to moral knowledge, from technology to conscience, but the structure remains strikingly similar. Where Prometheus steals fire, Adam and Eve eat from the tree of knowledge. Where Prometheus suffers eternally, humanity inherits a fallen world. In both cases, enlightenment is inseparable from pain. But there is a crucial difference. Prometheus acts knowingly and accepts his punishment without repentance. In Christian theology, transgression requires humility and redemption. Prometheus never asks forgiveness. He does not frame his act as a mistake. This makes him incompatible with Christian moral structure, and yet deeply fascinating to it. Early Christian writers often treated pagan myths as incomplete truths, stories that gestured toward deeper realities but lacked divine revelation. Prometheus, in this view, becomes a distorted prefiguration, a figure who loves humanity but lacks the authority to save it fully. This tension pushes Prometheus into the background for centuries. He is neither fully condemned nor fully embraced. He survives in marginal references, allegories, and philosophical echoes rather than central doctrine. Historically, this period marks a lull in Prometheus's cultural prominence. Societies oriented around divine obedience and revealed truth had little use for a figure who glorified foresight over faith. Progress was to be guided, not seized. Knowledge was to be received, not stolen. Yet the myth does not vanish, it waits. Prometheus's story is resilient because it speaks to a recurring human condition, the discomfort of knowing more than we are prepared to handle. As long as societies wrestle with the tension between authority and inquiry, between obedience and understanding, Prometheus remains latent, ready to be rediscovered. And he will be. In the next segment, we will see Prometheus return with force during the Renaissance and Enlightenment, when curiosity reasserts itself and the pursuit of knowledge once again becomes a moral act rather than a dangerous temptation. When Prometheus reemerges forcefully in Western thought, it is no accident. His return coincides with a period when inherited authority begins to crack and curiosity, long treated with suspicion, reclaims legitimacy. During the Renaissance and later the Enlightenment, Prometheus is no longer a marginal myth. He becomes a symbol of the human mind itself. The Renaissance revived classical texts not as relics, but as tools. Greek and Roman philosophy, science, and art were reread through a new lens, one that emphasized observation, proportion, and human agency. In this context, Prometheus's theft of fire was no longer sacrilege. It was courage. Fire now stood for reason, experimentation, and mastery over ignorance. The divine monopoly on knowledge weakened. Nature was no longer something to be feared or appeased. It was something to be studied. Prometheus's ancient transgressions suddenly looked like foresight rather than arrogance. By the Enlightenment, this shift had solidified. Knowledge was framed as a moral good. Ignorance was the enemy. Progress was not merely possible, it was expected. Prometheus fit perfectly into this worldview. He embodied the belief that humanity advances by questioning authority and claiming understanding for itself. This reinterpretation was not subtle. Philosophers and writers increasingly cast Prometheus as a hero of emancipation, a figure who liberated humanity from imposed darkness. The chains on the mountain became symbols of outdated dogma. Zeus became shorthand for oppressive power structures that feared enlightenment. Yet the myth's contradictions did not vanish. Even as Prometheus was celebrated, thinkers recognized the danger embedded in his story. Fire once again proved double-edged. Scientific progress delivered medicine and industry, but also exploitation, mechanized warfare, and environmental harm. The Enlightenment's Prometheus carried optimism, but also unease. This ambivalence sharpened in the early modern period when technological advances began to outpace ethical frameworks. The same rationality that produced scientific breakthroughs also produced systems of control, surveillance, and domination. Prometheus's gift was no longer innocent. Culturally, this is when Prometheus stops being merely ancient and becomes modern. He is no longer about gods versus mortals. He is about institutions versus individuals, tradition versus inquiry, restraint versus ambition. The myth scales upward, mapping neatly onto emerging nation-states, scientific academies, and industrial systems. Importantly, Prometheus is not reclaimed by religion during this period. He is claimed by humanism. His suffering is reinterpreted as the cost paid by innovators, those who think ahead of their time, and are punished by societies that benefit from their ideas only in hindsight. This is also when Prometheus begins to fracture into multiple modern archetypes: the scientist, the revolutionary, the heretic, the engineer. Each inherits part of his legacy, and each carries the same risk. Knowledge without consensus invites resistance. Historically, this moment marks the full internalization of the myth. The gods no longer punish Prometheus. Humans do. Institutions replace Olympus. Social exile replaces divine chains. Prometheus no longer hangs from a mountain. He is imprisoned, censored, dismissed, or forgotten. And still the fire spreads. In the next segment, we will follow Prometheus into the Romantic era, where emotion, suffering, and rebellion reassert themselves, and where the Titan becomes something darker, more personal, and more psychologically intense than ever before. By the time Prometheus enters the Romantic era, he is no longer a distant mythic figure or an abstract symbol of progress. He becomes intimate, emotional, wounded. The Romantics do not ask whether Prometheus was right or wrong. They ask what it felt like to defy the universe and endure the consequences. This shift reflects a broader cultural turn. The Romantic movement arose in response to the cold confidence of Enlightenment rationality and the dehumanizing effects of early industrialization. Reason had delivered power, but had also delivered alienation. The Romantics sought meaning not in systems, but in suffering, imagination, and individual will. Prometheus was ready-made for this transformation. In Romantic hands, Prometheus becomes the archetype of the solitary rebel, isolated not because he is mistaken, but because he sees too clearly. His chains are no longer just punishment, they are proof of integrity. To suffer for one's convictions becomes morally superior to comfort purchased through submission. No writer embodies this reinterpretation more fully than Percy Bysshe Shelley. In Prometheus Unbound, Shelley radically revises the ancient story. Zeus, now a stand-in for tyranny itself, is overthrown. Prometheus is freed not through violence, but through endurance and moral clarity. Compassion, not domination, becomes the engine of change. This is a profound departure from Greek myth. Shelley's Prometheus refuses revenge. He rejects the logic of power altogether. His suffering purifies rather than hardens him. In this version, the universe itself bends toward justice, not because authority allows it, but because tyranny collapses under its own weight. Historically, this reflects Romantic political idealism, born in the shadow of revolutions and crushed hopes. Prometheus becomes a vessel for aspirations that had failed in the real world. He is the promise that moral resistance, even when punished, is not meaningless. At the same time, Prometheus darkens. Romantic thinkers were acutely aware that rebellion does not guarantee redemption. Isolation can destroy as easily as it can ennoble. The Titan's eternal suffering begins to resemble psychological torment rather than cosmic drama. His foresight becomes a curse, seeing outcomes but being powerless to prevent them. This inward turn transforms Prometheus into a mirror for the modern self. Ambitious, restless, dissatisfied with inherited limits, yet haunted by unintended consequences. The myth becomes less about stealing fire and more about bearing awareness. Importantly, this is also the moment when Prometheus becomes inseparable from creative identity itself. The artist, the poet, the thinker, all are recast as Promethean figures, condemned to wrestle with truths that society may resist or misunderstand. Creativity becomes an act of theft from the unknown, paid for with alienation. The Romantic Prometheus is no longer punished by the gods. He is punished by his own depth. This transformation sets the stage for one of the most consequential reinterpretations of all, where Prometheus merges with modern science and horror, and the gift of fire becomes something far more dangerous than flame. In the next segment, we will turn to the 19th century's most unsettling Promethean creation and examine how the myth reshapes itself in the age of machines, laboratories, and unintended life. When Prometheus enters the modern age, he does not arrive as a titan or a rebel chained to stone. He arrives in a laboratory. His fire is no longer flame. It is electricity, chemistry, anatomy, and ambition. And his most enduring modern incarnation appears in a single, carefully chosen subtitle, The Modern Prometheus. That subtitle belongs to Frankenstein, written by Mary Shelley. With it, Shelley permanently welds Prometheus to modern science, shifting the myth from rebellion against gods to creation without restraint. In this retelling, Prometheus is no longer punished for stealing knowledge from above. He is punished for creating life without understanding responsibility. Victor Frankenstein is explicitly Promethean. He pursues forbidden knowledge, not out of malice, but out of awe. He wants to know how life works, and once he learns, he cannot resist using it. Like Prometheus, he acts alone. Like Prometheus, he never consults those who will bear the consequences. And like Prometheus, he suffers not because he fails, but because he succeeds. What changes here is the direction of blame. In ancient myth, Zeus punishes Prometheus. In Frankenstein, there is no god to intervene. No divine boundary enforcer arrives. The punishment is endogenous. It arises from neglect, fear, and refusal to take responsibility for what has been made. This is a critical modern shift. Shelley's Prometheus is not punished for knowing too much, but for caring too little afterward. Fire has become creation itself, and creation demands stewardship. The tragedy is not the act of innovation, but the abandonment that follows it. From a historical perspective, this reflects early industrial anxiety. The 19th century was witnessing unprecedented technological acceleration, factories, mechanization, scientific medicine, without corresponding moral frameworks. Humanity was learning how to make things faster than it was learning how to live with them. Prometheus, once a giver of gifts, becomes a cautionary figure. The creature in Frankenstein is not evil by design. It becomes monstrous through isolation, rejection, and neglect. This echoes Prometheus's own fate, but inverted. The creator becomes the distant god. The creation becomes the suffering being chained to consequence. This inversion is powerful. It suggests that humanity has inherited Zeus's role without realizing it. We now set boundaries, enforce outcomes, and distribute suffering, not from Olympus, but from institutions, laboratories, and systems we build ourselves. Shelley's framing strips away the comfort of mythic distance. There is no divine cruelty to blame. There's only human foresight, or the lack of it. In this modern Promethean world, the central question changes again. Not should we take the fire, but what do we owe once we have it? That question does not remain confined to fiction. It will reappear wherever humans generate power faster than wisdom, whether in machines, weapons, or systems that shape lives invisibly. In the next segment, we will follow Prometheus into the 20th and 21st centuries, where fire becomes data, energy becomes global, and the consequences of foresight, or its absence, scale to planetary proportions. By the 20th century, Prometheus no longer needs a face. He becomes distributed, embedded in systems, institutions, and technologies so vast that no single individual can fully comprehend them. The fire he once carried in a hollow reed now flows through grids, code, and networks that encircle the planet. In this era, Prometheus stops representing a lone rebel and begins to represent a condition: humanity's collective capacity to unlock forces it cannot fully control. The most obvious Promethean fire of the modern world is energy itself. Nuclear fission condenses the myth into a chillingly literal form: power stolen from the heart of matter. The language surrounding it is unmistakably mythic: harnessing, unlocking, taming. Like fire, nuclear energy offers abundance and annihilation in equal measure. And like Prometheus's gift, it cannot be uninvented. Here, the ancient structure reasserts itself with disturbing clarity. Knowledge is gained. Authority is bypassed, this time not divine, but moral and ecological. Punishment does not arrive from above. It arrives through risk, fear, and permanent vigilance. Humanity becomes both Prometheus and Zeus, both giver and enforcer, both transgressor and judge. The same pattern unfolds with digital technology. Information becomes fire without flame, capable of illuminating and destroying at once. Data reshapes economies, identities, and political power. Algorithms predict behavior before individuals recognize it themselves. The gift of foresight, once Prometheus's defining trait, is now outsourced to machines. This introduces a new contradiction. Prometheus acted for humanity, believing in its potential. Modern systems act on humanity, often indifferent to individual well-being. The myth's moral center shifts again, not whether knowledge should be taken, but who benefits from it, and who absorbs the cost. In earlier eras, Prometheus suffered, so humans could advance. In the modern era, suffering is diffused. It appears as environmental degradation, psychological fragmentation, and systemic inequality. No eagle descends. No chains are visible. The punishment is ambient. This diffusion makes accountability difficult. When harm emerges from complex systems, responsibility dissolves. No single figure stands accused. Prometheus becomes anonymous. The myth loses its dramatic clarity, but not its relevance. In fact, it becomes more unsettling because the boundaries Prometheus once crossed are now crossed continuously, incrementally, and without ceremony. Historically, this is the culmination of the myth's internalization. The gods are gone. Olympus is empty. What remains is foresight without wisdom, power without narrative restraint. And yet, Prometheus still whispers. Every debate about artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, climate intervention, or surveillance carries his imprint. The same ancient question persists beneath modern language. Are we prepared to live with what we are capable of creating? The modern world answers this question not with myth, but with scale. Consequences are no longer personal or local. They are global, irreversible, and slow-moving. The fire burns not in hearths, but in feedback loops. In the final segment, we will return to Prometheus not as a warning or a hero, but as a mirror, asking what the endurance of this myth reveals about humanity's relationship with knowledge, responsibility, and the future it continues to ignite. Prometheus has survived every transformation of human thought because he is not really a character. He is a recurring dilemma. Strip away the gods, the chains, the eagle, and the mountain, and what remains is a single, unresolved question that humanity keeps re-encountering under new names. What do we do once we know how? From his earliest appearance, Prometheus is defined not by fire, but by foresight. He sees outcomes before they arrive. He acts knowing there will be consequences. And he does so without certainty that those consequences will be just. This makes him neither savior nor villain. It makes him human in the deepest sense, anticipatory, restless, unwilling to remain confined by inherited limits. Historically, every era has reshaped Prometheus to match its anxieties. For archaic Greece, he explained why progress brings suffering. For classical Athens, he questioned the legitimacy of unchecked authority. For Renaissance and Enlightenment thinkers, he justified inquiry against dogma. For the Romantics, he embodied moral rebellion and inner torment. For the modern world, he became a warning about creation without responsibility. Yet none of these readings cancel the others. They accumulate. Prometheus endures because civilization itself is cumulative. We do not discard old fires when we discover new ones. We stack them. Each layer of knowledge rests on earlier transgressions, earlier risks, earlier acts of daring that could not be undone once taken. What makes Prometheus uniquely unsettling is that his punishment never prevents the gift from spreading. Zeus's authority fails in the only way that matters. Fire remains. Humanity keeps moving forward. Suffering does not reverse progress. It accompanies it. This is the myth's quiet realism. Prometheus is not about whether knowledge should exist. Knowledge always will. The myth is about whether foresight is paired with care, whether power is matched by restraint, whether advancement includes reflection. Unlike other myths, Prometheus offers no final reconciliation. There is no restored harmony, no clean redemption. Even when later traditions free him, the question he represents remains unresolved. The fire keeps burning. The consequences keep unfolding. In this way, Prometheus functions as a cultural memory, a reminder that humanity's greatest achievements have never arrived without cost, and that the cost is often paid unevenly, invisibly, or too late to prevent. He also reminds us of something more uncomfortable. Prometheus did not wait for permission. Progress rarely does. Every generation inherits a world shaped by decisions it did not make, powered by fires it did not light, and burdened by consequences it must now manage. Prometheus is the name we give to that inheritance, the moment when possibility outruns wisdom and forces us to grow into responsibility after the fact. The myth endures because it does not resolve this tension. It leaves us standing where Prometheus stood, able to see forward, unable to retreat, compelled to choose. And perhaps that is why he still matters. Not because he stole fire from gods, but because he reminds us that once the fire is in our hands, we are no longer innocent, and we are no longer allowed to look away.